Whoops. Hi, I'm Sarah Sedwick. Welcome to my studio. This is my online group session for November 2019. It's the last day of the second to last month of the decade. I'm glad you guys are with me. This month in our group, we took a look at skulls and bones. That was our kind of challenge theme for the month. People painted animal skulls, people painted antlers, people painted human skull replicas. No grave robbing occurred. And today I'm going to demo from my anatomical skull replica. This is Gerald. He just got that name this weekend. So what we're going to do is do some color mixing, and then I am going to paint it. As you see, I already have my underpainting done. And I recorded this and I posted a time lapse of this underpainting. Okay, but let's switch over and look at my palette before we start, because I am going to use a limited palette to paint today. And I'm glad that I was able to post that yesterday, so some of you have been able to look at it and kind of think about it a little bit. Let's pour some Gamsol into my lid here, and here's my Gamsol for cleaning brushes. This is walnut oil. This is my disposable paper palette pad. And the colors that I'm going to be working with today: burnt sienna, yellow ochre, ultramarine blue, titanium white. That's it. Those are the 4 tubes that I'm using. And from those, I mixed out all my secondaries: yellow, orange, orange, red, violet, violet, blue, green, green, yellow, green. The inner ring are tints. Many of you have seen me do this kind of thing dozens of times. There really is no end to the combinations that you can come up with 3 tubes of paint plus 1 tube of white. As long as you've got a red, a yellow, and a blue, you can mix the whole spectrum. And as you can see, I've got a beautiful range of muted oranges, greens, and violets here, and one very bossy looking blue. Who knew ultramarine blue could be so bossy, right? Well, we'll see. And so I did choose for my subject, and there's photo reference of Gerald on the Facebook page if you want to open that in a separate window and be looking back and forth, but I'm not going to be panning the camera to my still life. That's caused us some problems in the past. So I did choose to set up my skull still life with a blue negative space background, partly because I had chosen this palette, but partly because that was just what I wanted to do. I thought it would be a nice contrast with the creamy warmth of the bones. So we need to mix some colors. As I said, I already did my underpainting. I did the underpainting with this, my red orange. You know, when I work with a full chromatic palette, I mix basically cad yellow, cad red, and ultramarine blue to make a color that looks very much like the red orange that comes from burnt sienna and yellow ochre, right? And then I pulled in some of this, the red violet, when I wanted to kind of darken it up to get like these kind of passages. You've all seen me do this before. So let's mix some colors for the skull. My skull replica is kind of yellowish. I have actually painted a real human skull. My friend Patty McNutt, she has a real human skull. She got it in a legitimate way, I'm sure. And she lent it to me a few years ago, and I got to paint from that. And as I recall, it was whiter than this. It wasn't quite so yellow, but I guess they maybe come in all colors. Who knows? I've shared the link to where I got this on Amazon. It is in my my Sarah Sedwick Amazon list. Anybody that can't find it and is curious about where to buy one of these, they cost about $25. They come from China. The end. So there's been some talk amongst folks, not just you, Lucy, but Joanne as well, and maybe some others of you are struggling with this, of how you get your colors from the palette onto the canvas still feeling correct. If they felt okay to you on the palette, and then you get them up on the canvas and it's like, what did I just do? That's not at all what I was intending to do. What's going on here? You're not alone. You know, we all struggle with this. One of the issues that you might be having is the contrast of the warmth of the underpainting with the colors you put on top of it. Even if your mixed color feels very warm against the white background of your palette, when you get it up against that this doesn't look terribly warm now, but you know, you start putting some color on here and the brownness of this and the warmth of this is it's going to contrast with that, and it's going to show it up, and it may not feel as nice. You know what, let's do this. It may not feel quite as nice up on the canvas as it did on your palette. So this kind of creamy yellow color that I'm making, it's too pink. You know, if I hold it up on my palette knife and squint and look at it against Gerald's pallid jaundiced complexion, I see that it is too warm. It's too warm already. So what am I going to do? I'm going to put yellow and yellow green in it, because if it's too pink, what the antidote is the complement of red, which is green. And I'm getting a large pile of paint starting to accumulate here, which is good. Like, I want a lot of paint to paint with. But if it's getting out of control, divide the pile in half. Take one in one direction. And I know I'm grabbing from the tint there, but I'm mixing a light value color, so I think that's okay. There, that's probably better. That's too dark. That's quite dark. Yeah, it's pretty dark. So I'm mixing for the light side for this. Skull in the light. It looks very light on the monitor. It does not look that light to me here in the studio, but it looks good actually. And my concern is that I'm mixing for the light mass, which means the big light shape that is not the highlight. It needs to be dark enough for the highlight to show up. I have this great little highlight right on his whatever right there, and that needs to be able to show up. So in order for that to happen, this light mass color that I've mixed has got to be dark enough than titanium white that I can create that highlight. I have lots of wiggle room there. It's way darker than the white, right? Let's put some more white in it. We've got wiggle room. Okay, so this pile that I divided in half, now I've got my main thing for the light mass, and look, that is going to be on its way to being my light mid-tone. But it's still too chromatic. So if it's still too pink, let's take my regular green and tone it down. That's also going to darken it as I'm neutralizing the pink. That's good news. They're both kind of yellow, yellow, yellow. At some point, I need some violet. At some point, I need some violet. I think I'm just going to put some in. And then I'm going to divide this in half, and I'm going to put a bunch of violet in. Some of the tint, some of the regular pile. I want to darken it a little. I don't want to darken it a lot. That's awesome. I'm trying to be true to the colors I see, but I do also want to push them. And I am planning already that when I mix up the blues for my negative space, I'm going to be incorporating that into the shadow side, because I feel there's a lot of blue, especially in the jaw area down here, coming from the ground. As we're getting up into the mid-face, this sort of maxilla into the zygomatic arch area. I've been studying my skull anatomy terminology. I sent you guys some.
You're only focused on the palette.
Oh, sorry.
That's okay. When you were pointing to areas just now.
That's right. You can see my hand.
Yeah.
Good catch. Thank you. Okay, I'm going to digress real quick and keep mixing. Skull anatomy. Yeah, so there's within the shadow side of the skull, I do feel there are some temperature zones going on, and I'm already starting to see that. You know, I couldn't see that this morning when I was just doing the block in, but now that I'm actually looking at my palette and I'm looking at the skull and I'm thinking in terms of color, that stuff is starting to jump out at me a little bit more. It's kind of cool. You know, our eyes, when I was doing the block in, my eyes were just looking at value. And now that I've kind of got that a little bit under control in my mind, I'm starting to see more color. That's nice. Maybe it's not dark enough than the light side. No, I think it is. Let's see. I think there's like a warm shadow right there. Yeah, I don't know if that's gonna be dark enough. On the palette, it certainly looks like it is, but let's just go darker. We'll pretend these are midtones. We'll go darker. I'm gonna start with my dark. Should we go back to? I'm gonna start with my red violet, and let's lighten up from there, because yellow green, because nothing is going to give you a nice dark value, like starting from the other end. I started all of these from the light end. And that's very warm. It's very chocolatey. It's going to be a chocolate skull. Yellow green. Let's put a little more white in it, and I'll put my yellow tint. Still warm. If it's too yellow, put some purple in it. Everything I'm adding is just red, yellow, and blue. Could I do this from just one tube of red, one tube of yellow, one tube of blue, one tube of white without doing all this mixing of the secondaries? Because that's really all the ingredients that I have at my disposal, right? I could do that. But this is teaching me about how to function when I've got a full palette too. Because when I have access to, all my tubes of paint, I'm making decisions in the same way that I am here. And so I can go back and forth between a limited palette and a full palette, and I'm still using the same kind of thought process. Okay. Nice. Purplish, it's darker. I want it to be even darker. Now I'm just running out of stuff. That's not good. Burnt sienna. The burnt umber was the one I was painting with so much at the residency, and burnt umber is such a dry, crusty old man of a color. Just comes out, it has no oil in it, and then it just wants to dry up and go to bed immediately. Okay, I'm remixing my red violet because I ran out. And now I need some more real estate. So let's move these guys over. That's my violet and my violet tint. Here's my blue violet. And that's good because, we're going to make the negative space colors now. And I want to use these blue violets, blues, and blue greens to start with. So I will mix in their territory because that's what I'm using. I tend to always have light value colors on the left of the palette, dark value colors on the right. That's because, my dark value colors live over here. My blues, violets, black usually is down here. But you can also think of it in terms of the color wheel, a warm side and a cool side with the dividing line going right down the middle, right? You've got your warm green on the warm side, you've got your cool green on the cool side, and all these colors over here are the cooler colors. So I don't know, that feels like it's somewhat appropriate for the cast shadow, but it's not because, the cast shadow in my setup is actually a lot darker than this bone. So this is more like the negative space in the light, honestly. That's more like what I'm going for there. Let's lighten it. I don't know if I want green. Yeah, I do. Let's lighten it a little, and then we'll do the shadow. I want something for the negative space in the light and something for the negative space in the shadow, and I can tweak it from there to make it a little darker or a little lighter as I travel around the sort of zones that I envision in the negative space. This is the more shadow side of the painting. This is the shadow side of the skull. The negative space is lighter than the skull here, and it's darker than the skull here, even though this is the part of the background that's getting the strongest light. You see that over and over again in portrait. It's great. Okay, so let's mix the blue and the shadow. Start with violet. Put some blue in it. Let's put this in it. Great thing about using your tints to mix with is you clear more real estate for further mixing, and you still have your parent colors to choose from. So it's all about proportions. If it seems like I'm just grabbing things willy-nilly, I sort of am. Not really. I mean, there's thought behind it, but I'm also talking. The thing is, it doesn't matter. It's all the same 3 ingredients. I don't run the risk of putting in something that's really going to blow it up, create mud, because everybody's related here. This is a harmonious family gathering. How many of you can say that about your week? I hope all of you. We just had Thanksgiving. It's Saturday. Thanksgiving was Thursday. I have so many turkey leftovers in my fridge right now. But I purposefully did not have turkey for lunch today because I would be asleep right now if I had. This stuff is like horse tranquilizers to me. So it needed to be more warm. And the value looks good, the color looks good. I think I'm almost ready to go. Of course, this is not the whole cast shadow. We talk about getting air in our shadows a lot, right? So that means that this cast shadow is not just going to be one monolithic mass of my mixture. It's going to shift as it goes under the jaw. It gets darker, it gets warmer. I don't know. I don't really, yeah, it does. And I can do that. I can do it with the brush. I can do it now. Am I going to forget what I made this for? Maybe it'll come in handy for something else. But as the cast shadow slides under the skull, I do feel that it shifts. But that little area right here, that's not enough to necessarily mean that I have to mix a whole pile on the palette for it. So I'm in decent shape to be starting with. So where should we start? We always say we want to start with an easy win. We want to start with something we think we've mixed correctly and we think we understand. But I sort of want to get some of my light mass established so that I can start making comparisons. I'm not 100% sure that I'm correct about my light mass, but I want to test it. I want to see how I feel. Like I already did. I swiped some up here, but I need gel. I want to get some more. Ding. Solvent-free gel. I have walnut oil too. I'll probably use them both. Just a little bit on the brush and then mix it into the paint as I'm loading the brush, cross-hatching in the paint. And then we'll start with, you know, it's interesting like where you start brush stroke wise, excuse me. Maybe you guys like to start in the middle and work your way out. I kind of like to start with an edge and work my way in. So I'm near the edge and I'm looking at my drawing, you know, so when I'm blocking in, I'm thinking more linearly. I'm thinking about the contour line, but I try to switch my thought process back and forth as I'm doing any kind of drawing between contour line and value shapes. But when I'm painting, I really am looking at shapes and I'm getting another chance to draw the subject kind of from the inside out by investigating those shapes again. Forehead. Yes. I'm going to pull a bit of my violet into this because I don't think it was dull enough. It was still too yellow. I'm trying to get that edge to turn, but it is still kind of slight at this point. I'm using a number 4 flat and I'm pressing down with the whole brush. You know, we can get a wide variety of strokes. You can still make wimpy tentative marks even with a big brush if you only use the corner. I think some of you have probably figured that out. And vice versa, you can get very delicate, pretty. You can get very delicate marks with a big brush if you practice controlling that. There's not quite as much, you know, whenever I paint a skull, I always try to, or draw a skull, I always try to envision what the human would have looked like. But I honestly, I don't even know if this is a man or a woman. I suspect this is a male skull because of the jaw corners, how pronounced the jaw corners are, this piece here. But I do think about what this guy would have looked like. This divot between the eyebrows, you know, I have this. I think that mine is, or it needs to be darker. I think mine is, look at how I'm mixing between my pre-mixed piles now. Everything becomes everything else eventually. I'm going for kind of a rosy, light mid-tone that runs down the side of the nose bones here, the nasal bones. That's not warm enough or light enough. Mm-hmm. But I kind of, I did a self-portrait last month, and those of you who've done self-portraits, as you're looking at the skull, think about like, how do these parts correspond to my face? Where have I seen this stuff on my face? What does that feel like on my face? And this area right here, that's like the angles that come down between your eyebrows, and mine is very deep, you see. Yeah. All right, so I feel there's so much warmth inside these eye sockets. I'm gonna leave the nose alone for a minute. Let's go work somewhere else. Never want to feel like I've finished any. Let's go straight to orange, red orange tint. It's the right value. I feel a lot of warmth in there. Why not? My underpainting is already dry-ish. Certainly is. I can feel that. So I need to be remembering to put more gel and goop in my paint as I go. So that's all the way across in this eye. I love this interaction of the eye socket and the nose, the nasal bones. That's very obvious to me when I paint a 3/4 view portrait all the time. And I'm always looking for how the nose and the bridge of the nose comes in front of the far eye. I can't be the human model and the painter at the same time. I'm sorry. I'd like to be, though. I'd like to do it all. That's getting a little high. Yeah, it's getting high. Why do we make this beautifully detailed underpainting only to then obliterate it? Well, it helps me understand my subject, gives me an idea of where I'm going. It establishes some values that I can work against as I'm starting. And you know, the second and third time you draw something, the better it is going to be. Better you are going to be. Yes, I'm not feeling very much color variety is happening here. And we sort of hit on this on the Facebook page about like, why do you really need all these secondaries in between the red and the yellow when you have burnt sienna and yellow ochre? Because they really do look kind of the same. And these colors are not, they're not being very temperature different for me. So we'll see what I can do with that. I think I just need to get a little more paint on and kind of keep going and see what happens. So what I'm trying to do here is that I do feel, I don't know, this can't be my imagination. I mean, there's stronger light up on the frontal bone than there is down here on the cheekbone. And I feel the cheekbone is warmer as it's getting a little farther from the light source. Or, yeah, it feels pinker. So I'm making it pinker. I'm trying to keep the value close, but just add a little warmth. You know, we talk about having temperature shifts across a monolithic plane. This Gerald is not a monolithic plane by any means. He's very knobby and curvy, but he's made of all the same stuff. So how do I make that interesting when the texture isn't changing? Temperature shifts. The color isn't changing, the texture is, maybe the texture is changing a little. But I don't want this to feel like just a light, a medium, and a dark version of the same color. I got a lot of paint on the brush. And so I want to bring in temperature fluctuations. I want to be on the lookout for what feels warmer, what feels cooler. And I don't have to think in terms of the words warm and cool. If the words pink and blue help me more, if the words red and green help me more, if the word lavender helps you more. But you know what word doesn't help you is gray. And brown doesn't help you either unless you really have a solid concept of brown as being like a certain kind of brown, warm, orangish, reddish, whatever. But brown and gray can mean a lot of different things. So what I'm looking for when I'm trying to pick a color value, right? So I have a more purpley dark and I have a more yellowy dark. When I'm trying to choose one to paint with, neither one of these is going to suit my purposes because what I want is a pink one. But I'll go to the purple one and then I'll add red to it because I really feel like this piece of dark It comes down the zygomatic arch right here, and around the eye socket is very pink. I want the right value, but if it's not the right temperature, then I want to make it the right temperature before I put it on, just for this area. But having that pre-mixed pile of the correct value, that's close to the right hue, saturation, as close as I can get it, that's a good place for me to be. And then while I've got it on the brush, I'll say, well, where else is that? Do I see that anywhere else? Maybe I'll put some of it here. This little shadow shape coming down the side of the nose opening is very descriptive of what's happening here. And so if I get this shape right, I think I'll also be saying a lot about the architecture of the nose, about the architecture of the eye socket, and so forth. Gosh, anyway, it's a good reminder to me to check in, come back to some awareness. Any kind of enforced break can be good. There is such an interesting edge where those turn. It's not a sharp edge. It is such a soft, and it's like a sharp, soft edge around the eye sockets. It's so interesting. So, but I got knocked off my train of thought, which is fine. But what I need to do then before I launch back into it is wipe the brush off so I know what I have on the brush. Maybe I'll even clean it and then just go work somewhere else. Because I don't know, I don't remember what I had on my brush or what I was working on, which is fine. Let's work inside the nose. The nasal cavity. I am kind of glad that I did the block in alone, because it took me a long time and it was not that easy. This is not an easy subject to draw. The skull is not like anything else. All our practice on fruit and whatever else we do is helpful, certainly for any subject. Learning how to show form, learning how to understand the way light travels over these forms. It applies to everything. But the skull is so different from so many things. How's that look? It looks weird. I think it looks weird. Yeah, this came out too much. Comparison measuring, right? If you think if this might have come out too far, I hold my paintbrush up against actual Gerald, and the outside of the nose comes about here in the eye socket. So rein it in. And then maybe the eye socket just gets bigger. A little bigger, because that piece is quite thin there. Yeah, let's look at that. That's better, I think, arguably. Mm. Okay, I am in danger of getting sucked into little details, edges, whatnot. Let's pull away from that. Let's get some paint on the rest of this and a little in the negative space before I get too into what I might call eyelashes. Yes, let's do that. More goop on the paintbrush. If the paint is not flowing nicely for you, don't struggle against sticky paint. Don't do it. Put whatever you have to put on there to get it to feel the way you want it to feel. Okay. Some kind of lights that live in the shadows. You notice these are my midtones. These are lights that live in the shadows. If I'm in the shadow family, you know I'm not going to be painting above what? Well, depends whether we have a three-step value scale here. I guess I'm not painting above 2. Nah. And then there's some more darks under the jaw here. That's so blue. Oh, this shadow, that's so blue. Let's get some blue. You flex your color seeing muscles. Do something that is controversial to you. If you've got the value right, you're going to be fine. Purple, blue. I feel that that kind of hole is warmer. Picking up paint from the surroundings. Go back to the palette and get more. Don't just keep spreading it around everywhere. You saw what happened. I had dark paint on my brush. It ran kind of into the light paint that's on the skull there, lighter paint anyway. Picked it up, and then when I bring it back in here, it just starts lightening it. And if I don't go back to the palette and get more paint, I'm just gonna lighten everything until it's all gonna be Easter. Or it'll all be a dark midtone. Very confusing for me. Yes, whatever that is, let's make that softer. Deal with that later. But this is not dark enough. Well, let's go in my brown. And brown I mixed from the 3 primaries. It works on everything. It's my all-purpose dark value color. Let's work in the negative space a little bit. Or, no, it's not quite yet. Anybody have any questions? Is this all making somewhat sense? Light on this side of the cheekbone for sure, but it's not as light as the light on the other cheekbone because it's farther from the light source. And that happens so much with a live model. We know that piece of light that can get on the cheek. We usually have a cast shadow of a nose here, but we don't have a nose here. That light shape comes down into the upper lip.
What is your thought process about painting the teeth?
Do as little as possible and hope it works. So general to specific, that is my non-smart ass answer to that question. I want to get the average value / color temperature for the area of teeth that I'm like that's the lower teeth. This is the upper teeth. This is the maxilla, the upper lip bone. And so I really do not want to render the teeth very much. But if I was going to, there's this kind of seam, and the 2 front teeth are kind of like here, like there. And there's a shadow of the teeth. There's a shadow of the front teeth. This person, Gerald, I don't know that Gerald went to an orthodontist. There's kind of like a snaggletooth shadow onto the lower teeth. The teeth continue to be somewhat in light on the lower jaw, but not as much. And then they fade into the dark totally. So I'm hoping that when they go in the dark, then I can just stop worrying about them. The less said, the better. And I feel that way about teeth on live people with lips too. You know, the lips shade the teeth just like the eyelids shade the eyeball. And you don't want these like gray, shadowy teeth, okay? But if you make them white, they're not going to look natural. So it's a tough one. And I would much prefer a Mona Lisa smile to teeth. There is this kind of light, this theme of light that travels along the edge of the bottom teeth, the gum line. And there's even like a brighter highlight on the upper teeth. Kind of weird. It's not a place that humans with skin have highlights because the lips shade it so much. Something's not right here. And you can see how I just follow the shapes around. This is how I paint. I mean, this isn't just because it's Gerald. This is how I paint everything. I'm just following the shapes around the form. I don't really want to be painting every area 4 times as I seem to be doing this afternoon, but if I gotta work my way into it, then that's what I gotta do. It would be nice to be able to nail it on the first try, but you don't always get lucky. Now there is a point when you get so in the weeds that you have to scrape. Yes, that happens. You can't just keep going over and over it forever. I have no paint right here at all. It looks like paint. It's not. Okay, we're getting somewhere. What do you think? I'm not done with the teeth, but I'm just gonna move on for a little bit because I wanna see how they look when I get some more paint on the canvas.
Yes, you're getting somewhere.
Oh, thank you. I really like the skull roundup that I put together yesterday. That looks good together. I'm pleased. All of your work this month has been great. And I so appreciate the way that you guys were interacting and hanging out on Facebook while I was away. I mean, I was there too, but I just love how you guys talk amongst yourselves. It makes me so happy. And the interesting questions that came up and the way we all kind of worked on them together was fantastic. There's some kind of reflected light. It's not very bright, but there is reflected light. No, that's way too bright. So we're just going to mix the midtone and the dark together for this reflected light that's on the edge of the teeth. Good. All right, this stuff that I thought was going to be okay for the shadow, the sort of the bedbug line on the skull here was not dark enough. So I'm glad that I didn't go all the way with that. I just kind of started to create the bedbug line and I was not going dark enough, which is fine. This is too fat, but I'm gonna fix that with the background negative space. Is that light enough? There's kind of a half tone that comes, you know, on Mr. Plains, this would be the sort of 3/4 side plane that comes over the eyebrow. And that's usually facing away from the light source and it's in more shadow than the main forehead. And then it gets darker, quite a bit darker rapidly. We would have hair to cover this up probably, unless we were a man. And then who knows? So you wouldn't see that rapid drop off in the flesh tones beyond the temple because the hair would be there. Oh, I need something. If you do your underpainting and let it let it sit for a little while, and then you come back and do your overpainting and you're struggling with a dry, crusty canvas like I am, yeah, you could just keep adding more medium to your paint, as I am adding solvent-free gel and walnut oil right now, or you could swipe some Gamsol again and just kind of refresh. It's not oiling out, right? You wouldn't want to put oil between your underpainting and your next layer. It's just too soon to get that fat. But the same concept of just kind of waking it up, wetting it down with just Gamsol would have been a good option for me if I had thought of it. And yeah, you'll rub out some of your underpainting, but not very much, not all of it. Yes. Shift. Yes, I do. In the background, in the negative space, I like to have a temperature shift or a value shift or some kind of shift. Because the thing is, if we just have a bunch of empty space, how do we make that a little bit more visually stimulating for our viewers? And we don't want to like really make it a thing. We still want it to be a supporting character, but we don't want it to bring like a flat deadness. We want it to support it in a beautiful, active way, and maybe even create a little depth and interest while we're at it. And so adding a shift of some kind across any otherwise blank area can really take our paintings to the next level in a cool way. Certainly be looking for that as I go into the negative space, which I promise I'm about to do almost immediately. I keep threatening. Okay, so let's say we're gonna go now and firm up the contour line of the skull going around the outside. And this is good because we get a chance to test out our mixtures and we get a chance to revisit our contour line. It's always a good idea to look at your painting from far away before you do that. And then look at it in the monitor and maybe look at it in the rearview mirror. No, I'm sorry, you guys can't see that, but I have one. It's on the wall right there. And I had, at the residency, I had a rearview mirror too. That's too saturated. That's this. And it looks like really saturated. You know, where do I feel that though? I feel that here. Yes, when I got to the residency, I was like, I need a mirror. I need a mirror in the studio. They were like, in your bedroom? And I was like, no. Rear view studio mirror. So I get to soften that edge. I get to redefine the contour line a bit. And that's the shadow color that I mixed. Probably lighten that again. There more jaw there? Yeah. So, no, let's use that one. How can I paint light over dark? Well, you only get one shot, really. The more times I touch it, that blue is going to mix in and it's going to start to come through. Maybe I will like that. I don't know. Probably won't. Yeah, let's put some green there. Blue and yellow make green. Now that's starting to look green down there. Yuck. I heard that. So this was too saturated for my taste today. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to put it in this green walnut oil, because I do think that the back wall, the blues are a little bit different. I didn't, even if it was the exact same paper, they're very close. they have different light on them. One's vertical, one's horizontal, so they would have felt different. They would have felt different to my eye. Who knows what that would have felt like? But I'm paying attention, and it gets ever so slightly darker feeling as it comes up to the margin of the face. It's not a face. I get a chance to soften that edge where I want to. Maybe refine it, pull it in a little closer to the eye socket. What is that angle really doing? Is it doing anything interesting? Maybe it's all too wide. I don't know, it's arguable. The darker I make the negative space, maybe I'll just make it straight up green. The darker I make the negative space around the top of the skull, the lighter it's gonna feel. Yeah, it didn't feel that light against that sort of, my underpainting did it, but it will feel light against the darker negative space. So if I take this really dark, it's not actually that dark. This dark light, this is the dark on the light side. And I use it as, let's see, is this actually lighter? It's not lighter, okay, so it's not lighter than the back of the skull. And we talked earlier about if I want a lost edge there, and I don't actually see any lost edges because the cast shadow is darker than this. This is lighter than this. If I want a lost edge, I've got a great opportunity to make one there. But for argument's sake, and because it doesn't look like that, I don't want a lost edge there today. So what I'm gonna do after I put in this piece of violet that I see on the side of the head, so beautiful, is I'm gonna lighten that with white or some yellow or something. Brush mixing. Synthetics are not excellent for brush mixing. Too green, add some red. What do we have? It's lighter than that. So it is, I am actually going to use lighter paint on the supposed shadow side to pop that out. And then I can kind of make a mid-tone deal. I didn't have enough pre-mix for the negative space, obviously. And put that here to run them together. Lighter and warmer, I think, as we approach the light source. I do actually feel that it gets pinker, even though I was seeing all this green right here. So I feel like it gets pinker as it approaches the light. So let's pull some of my pink skull face color and some blue, and we'll end up with really something very, nope, not. Something kind of similar to a lighter tint of this, really, probably. My violet. So you get a lot of paint in the brush when you brush mix, which is not great. It's messy, you know, you can't control your brush marks as well. Lighter and warmer as it gets near the light